Marcus Shin didn't follow her
You
because
came.
he suspected a
I had
crime.
to.
He
It's not
followed her
safe here.
because 4 months of watching Naomi move through his house like a ghost, quiet, careful, never asking for anything, had done something to him he refused to name. He told himself it was about security. He told himself a man in his position couldn't afford blind spots. But as he pressed his back against the wet brick and watched her disappear into the dark mouth of that alley, he knew, somewhere beneath all that expensive reasoning, that this had nothing to do with security. And everything to do with the fact that when she walked away from him, his chest felt like a room with the lights cut off. Whatever was behind that rusted iron door was about to destroy every story he had told himself about who he was. The housekeeper's secret. A love story in the dark. The rain came down in sheets. He moved fast, staying close to the wall, his Italian shoes soaking through in seconds. But he didn't care. All he cared about was her, the figure ahead of him, moving through the dark with a purpose she had never shown inside his mansion. Marcus Shin pressed himself against the wet brick and watched Naomi disappear around the corner. His heart hammered. Not from exertion. From something worse. If you're new here, subscribe right now, because this story is only going to get more intense from here. He had fired 3 housekeepers in 2 years. Cold, efficient, no second chances. So when Naomi Adeyemi walked into his home with her quiet voice and careful eyes, he gave her 1 week before she quit like the rest. That was 4 months ago. For months. And now he was following her through the worst part of the city at midnight, telling himself it was about security. About loyalty. About what she might know. It wasn't about that. He just couldn't admit it yet. Asterisk, asterisk, asterisk. 3 days earlier, Marcus had been standing at the floor-to-ceiling window of his penthouse, watching the city below, when his head of security, Jean, walked in without knocking. That was always a bad sign. She left again, Jean said flatly. Same time. Same bag. Marcus didn't turn. And nothing good happens in that part of the city at night, sir. She's a housekeeper, Jean. Not an operative. She knows your schedule. She knows your codes. She knows you. Jean paused. That's enough to make her dangerous. Marcus finally turned. You're saying I should let her go? I'm saying you should know what she's doing before you decide. He hadn't slept well after that. He lay in the dark and thought about Naomi the way he told himself he wasn't allowed to, the way she placed his coffee exactly 2 inches from his keyboard without being asked, how she never flinched when his voice went cold, how she sometimes hummed to herself in the kitchen when she thought no one was listening. She was hiding something. He knew people who hid things. He was one of them. But the way she moved through his house, like she was trying to take up as little space as possible, like she had spent a lifetime making herself invisible, that didn't feel like a threat. That felt like survival. He told himself that wasn't his problem. Then she left her scarf behind one evening, folded on the kitchen counter, and he stood there holding it for longer than any sensible man should. Asterisk, asterisk, asterisk. The next evening he watched from his car as she slipped out through the side gate, head low, that same black bag over her shoulder. He gave her half a block, then followed. She moved fast for someone who seemed so still inside his walls. Through the busy market where vendors were packing up their stalls, past the harbor where fishermen tied their boats in the dark, down streets that narrowed until there were no streetlights left. Marcus kept his distance, his jaw tight, his hands in his pockets. Why does my heart race when she walks away? He didn't let himself answer that. She turned into an alley and then through a rusted iron door in the side of what looked like an abandoned textile warehouse. He waited, counted to 30, then moved to a broken window low on the wall and looked through. What he saw stopped him cold. The inside of the warehouse was nothing like the outside. Warm light, real light from lamps and string bulbs filled a wide open space. Folding tables were set up in rows, covered with food. Rice, stew, bread, fruit. Children ran between the tables, laughing. Old men sat in chairs along the walls, eating slowly, talking quietly. Women bounced babies. A group of teenagers sat in a circle in the corner, textbooks open in their laps, a young woman pointing at a whiteboard. And in the middle of it all, there was Naomi. She had changed out of her uniform. She wore a bright wrap skirt and a yellow top, and she looked, there was no other word for it, free. She was moving from table to table, checking on people, handing out small paper bags that Marcus guessed held medicine. She knelt down to a child with a bandaged arm and said something that made the boy burst out laughing. She stood and hugged an old woman who grabbed her face with both hands and spoke to her in a language Marcus didn't recognize. He pressed closer to the window, his breath fogging the glass. She wasn't hiding a crime. She was hiding kindness. Asterisk, asterisk, asterisk. He stayed for over an hour. He couldn't leave. He watched her teach a reading lesson to 3 elderly men who leaned over their papers with intense concentration. He watched her argue, gently, firmly, with a man who looked like he wanted to leave, until he sat back down and ate. He watched her count out pills from a plastic bag into little envelopes, her lips moving as she kept track. The warehouse was full of people who didn't belong anywhere else. Afro-Korean families. Recent immigrants. Mixed children who moved between languages like they were changing shoes. People the city had decided not to see. She saw them. Marcus walked back to his car slowly. He sat behind the wheel for a long time and didn't start the engine. His bodyguard called twice. He sent it to voicemail. Asterisk, asterisk, asterisk. The next morning, Naomi arrived at 7 as always. She let herself in through the kitchen entrance, hung up her coat, and began preparing his breakfast with the same quiet efficiency she always brought to his house. He was already at the table when she brought his coffee. She set it down exactly 2 inches from his keyboard. He looked up at her. Sit down. She froze. Sir, sit. Please. She sat across from him, her hands folded in her lap, her face completely still. She had a face built for stillness. He had noticed that from the beginning. But behind it, he could see something working. I followed you last night, he said. The stillness broke. Just for a second, her eyes widened, her breath caught, and then she pulled it back together. But he had seen it. Fear. Real fear. I see, she said quietly. I saw the warehouse. The people. What you do there. She said nothing. She was looking at the table. Naomi. She looked up. Her eyes were bright and hard, and he realized she was bracing herself. She was waiting for the punishment. Waiting for him to say the thing she had always been afraid someone like him would say. How long? He asked. She blinked. What? How long have you been running it? A long pause. Then, for years. My father started it. When he died, I kept it going. Her voice was careful, measured. She was still waiting for the trap. I didn't think you would approve. Given your associates. My associates, he repeated. The men who come here. What they do. She lifted her chin slightly. I didn't want them anywhere near those people. He felt something move in his chest. Not anger. Something that had been very still for a long time, shifting. Your father built it, he said. He was an immigrant. He knew what it was to have nothing and to be invisible. She paused. I clean your house by day. And at night, I try to be useful to people who have no one else. He was quiet for a moment. Then, that's why you're always so tired on Thursdays. She looked at him, surprised. He had noticed. She hadn't expected him to notice. Yes, she said softly. He stood up. Walked to the window. Outside, the city was moving, cars, people, ordinary noise. He thought about all the things he had built. The companies, the holdings, the cold and profitable empire he had assembled through deals that he never let himself think about too long in the dark. He turned back to her. I'm going to fund it, he said. Legally. Whatever it needs. She stared at him. You're what? The building needs work. The roof, probably. You're running it on what? Your salary. And donations. Small ones. Her voice had gone strange. Why would you do that? He looked at her for a long moment. This was the question he had been afraid of. Because it meant answering something true. Because I've spent 15 years building things that don't matter, he said. And you've spent 4 years building something that does. And I think I've been waiting for a reason to change direction. He paused. You're the reason. She stood up slowly. Her eyes were full, but she wasn't crying. She was holding it. I thought you would hate me, she said. I thought when you found out, you'd say I was using your house as cover. Thought I was lying to you. You were. I know. A breath. I'm sorry. Don't be. He crossed the room and stopped 2 feet away from her, close enough that the distance between them felt intentional. I've never respected anyone more than I do right now. She looked up at him. Something shifted between them, something that had been there for months, that both of them had been pretending wasn't, and neither of them moved away from it this time. Asterisk, asterisk, asterisk. Jean found out that evening. He cornered Marcus in the study, jaw set, voice low and controlled in the way that meant he was genuinely angry. You went there, Jean said. To the warehouse. I did. And now you want to fund it. He said it like a sentence. Marcus. Listen to me. If you start a legal paper trail to that building, people will ask questions. People who already watch you will watch you differently. And her, she knows everything about your life. Your schedule, your habits, who comes through that door. If she becomes a liability, she's not a liability. You don't know that. I know her. Jean went very still. He looked at Marcus the way he had looked at him for years, measuring him, reading the situation. Then something changed in his face. Something that was almost resignation. She's changed something in you, Jean said quietly. Yes. A long silence. Then I hope she's worth it, Jean said, and left. Asterisk, asterisk, asterisk. Marcus began the process the next week. A legal entity, a formal board, proper funding. He hired a contractor to assess the warehouse building, and the report came back with 23 items that needed immediate attention, including the roof, the plumbing, and the electrical system. He signed off on all of it without flinching. He also began, quietly, to distance himself from the men who had made him rich and made him afraid of the dark. It was not a clean process. It was not without cost. There were nights when he sat alone in his study and stared at the wall and felt the weight of what he was undoing, the years, the decisions, the version of himself that had made those decisions. He did not pretend it was simple. But he kept going. Naomi still came every day. She still made his coffee and placed it exactly 2 inches from his keyboard. But now sometimes she sat with him in the evenings and told him about the people at the shelter, not the hard things, not the pain, but the small victories. The boy who had learned to read. The family who had found housing. The old woman who had reconnected with a daughter she hadn't spoken to in 11 years. He listened to all of it. He asked questions. He remembered names. She noticed. One night, very late, she asked him, "What made you want to change?" He was quiet for a moment. "I think I was always looking for a way out. I just needed to see that there was somewhere worth going." She was quiet too. Then she reached across the table and put her hand over his, just for a moment. Just briefly. It was enough. Asterisk, asterisk, asterisk. Months later, on a Tuesday evening, they walked along the harbor together. The shelter had opened its new building the week before, proper rooms, a medical clinic, a library, a kitchen that could feed 300 people. There had been a small ceremony. Children had drawn pictures and hung them on the walls. The city was lit up across the water, and the air smelled like salt and something almost like hope. "My father would have liked you," Naomi said. Marcus looked at her. "I'm not sure I would have deserved that, for months ago." "No," she agreed. "But you do now." He laughed. It surprised him. He didn't laugh easily, he never had. But it came out of him naturally, without effort, and it felt like something loosening that had been wound tight for a very long time. She smiled at him. He had learned to stop pretending he wasn't moved by that smile. He followed her to uncover a secret, a voice might have said, looking back on all of it. But instead, he found a reason to change his life. They stood at the railing for a long time. The city moved behind them. The water moved below. And Marcus Shin, who had spent 15 years being afraid of what he had built, stood next to the woman who had shown him that it wasn't too late to build something better. He had followed her into the dark. What he found there was light. Asterisk, asterisk, asterisk. If this story moved you, hit that like button right now. It genuinely helps more people find it. Drop a comment below and tell me, did you see the ending coming? And if you haven't subscribed yet, do it now so you never miss a story like this one.